Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. Yes, I did cut off my hair and go a little bit blonder. Just wanted a little something different before my husband and I go on our big UK trip, which we'll be leaving in about a week, so it's coming up fast. But in today's video, I'm going to be doing a tag. I was tagged by the lovely Shelly Swearingen, and I'm going to be answering the question, why haven't I read these books yet? Ultimately, I'm checking in with you about some books that have been on my want to read list for years, or I've owned for the longest time, and I don't know why I haven't read them. We'll get to explore that together. So let's get into it. The first is a classic book that I have not read, and I have a few answers to this question, of course. First one is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've owned this book for over 10 years, this specific copy, which is a beautiful Harper perennial classic copy. I got this at Costco over 10 years ago, and I've yet to read it. I am happy to report, though, that I have been loving classics, reading more than I ever have this year, and I would have had very different answers to this question at the beginning of the year, but I've made good progress on my classics list. This one, though, is still on it, still lingering. Jane Eyre, I honestly have no idea what it's about. I think it's about like a young woman and an older man, and it's supposed to be gothic and creepy. I don't know any details, and I don't really want to know. I want to go in blind and see how I fare with it. Another one that I also got from Costco that I've had for years and years and years and years on my shelf, and that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Now the problem is that I feel like I have to read this book, but I actually have no desire to read it, which seems sad, I know, but the heart of the story is an affair, which I don't love to read about at all, but I feel like I have to read it because it's a classic. It's a Russian classic. It's Anna Karenina. My parents read this in high school in Russia, you know, when they had to. When will I ever read this? I don't know. And why haven't I read it? Because I haven't really had the desire to. I guess at some point I did because I purchased it, but I also still don't want to get rid of it. I might get to it someday. And then finally for classics, East of Eden. Although I haven't owned a physical copy of it for years, it has been on my TBR, or my want to read list, on Goodreads since 2016, which was one of the first books that was added to that list. I have every intention to get to this book this year. We'll see if that happens. All right, number 2. What's a fiction book that I haven't read yet that I feel like I should have? This one was a tough one because I could say anything. This cart right here is kind of like the books that I am prioritizing out of all of the books that I own, so I could literally pick any of these. Gilead, why haven't I read this yet? It's one of my friend's all-time favorite books, but I'm so intimidated by it. I don't know why. But I will also mention Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I feel like I need to read this, and why haven't I read this yet? Especially as a historical fiction lover. I will say I've not read any historical fiction in medieval, Tudor time period, etc. This is all about Thomas Cromwell, who was in Henry VIII's court. I don't know much about that time period or that history. I did visit the Tower of London when I was in London many years ago, so I got to learn some interesting things. I've heard fantastic things about this book and this series. Maybe I'm a little intimidated by it. Maybe that's why I haven't read it. That's probably ultimately the answer to all of these, is I haven't read it yet because I'm intimidated by it or was distracted by other books. The next category I'm going to talk about is nonfiction. So what's a nonfiction book I haven't read yet? Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I love a good memoir. I've also watched the movie of this forever ago when it first came out, but I have not read the book yet, and it's not even that intimidating. I just don't know why I haven't, and I plan to listen to the audiobook paired with the physical book. I feel like this is a must read on many nonfiction lovers lists. To be honest, I've done pretty good with reading the most popular nonfiction out there, you know, Educated, check, Becoming, check. A lot of the other celebrity memoirs I have read, and for the most part loved all of them, but Wild I haven't gotten to yet, and it's on my summer list. I still might get to it by the end of August, maybe September. Also Killers of the Flower Moon. This was one of the first books that I've purchased since starting BookTube. It was one of the first books that I heard about that was like, you need to read it if you love nonfiction and like true crime. So this one has been on many TBRs, and I need to get to it. The next category is a genre book. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I feel like any genre, just pick your genre. So a book that epitomizes the genre. I mentioned this book in one of my recent videos about a book that was in purgatory, and y'all convinced me to keep it around still. That is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This I also purchased from Costco over 10 years ago. It's been on my shelves and I have not read it. I tried the first chapter. I was super bored, so I thought I'm gonna get rid of it, but I just couldn't pull the plunge. And then when I mentioned this book, so many of you said give it a go, and so I still want to try it. And then of course I'm gonna touch on historical fiction because it's my favorite genre. And I have 3 books that I feel like as a historical fiction lover I am a fraud for not having read them yet. The Time Traveler's Wife. I need to read this. This is like one of the top books in that genre, so Why haven't I read it? I don't know. These next two I mentioned in my historical fiction vlog. I tried the chapter of both of these books and absolutely loved them. Beneath the Scarlet Sky and A Gentleman in Moscow. As a historical fiction lover, why haven't I read these yet? They're so beloved. They're so well rated. They're so hyped. And I think for good reason, based on the first chapter. I didn't get a chance to get to them in that vlog. I want to read them by the end of the year. I think it's gonna happen. World War II set in Italy and about a gentleman in a Moscow hotel amidst the Russian Revolution. I have the highest hopes and am expecting the best things for these books. And then the last category is what is a book that you have owned the longest that you haven't read? And that is gonna be The Time in Between by Maria Dunez. This is truly a book that I have owned just as long as The Dragon Tattoo and Anna Karenina and Jane Eyre. Also bought at Costco over 10 years ago. I don't know why I bought it. I hadn't heard anyone talk about it. I think I just saw the cover, thought it was pretty, figured it was historical fiction, read the back, and was like, Spanish Civil War in Madrid, and decided to keep it. I have not heard a single person talk about this book or mention it anywhere. So please, if you have read this book or know anything about it, let me know, because I don't know anything. It does sound really good as a historical fiction, so I have kept this chunky book around for a while. I even remember I've taken it on a couple vacations with me. I've packed this big book not once but twice with me on vacation to like Mexico or the beach or wherever I ended up going, and I never read it. I never even picked it up. And then the last thing to do is to tag some people. So I'm gonna tag Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day, Miriam from Miriam Elizabeth Reads, and Brittany from Literarily Smitten. And you let me know in the comments, what is a book that you have owned the longest physically that you have not read for whatever reason? I will say I feel slightly guilty after doing this video about some of these books, because I ideally don't really want a book to sit on my shelf for over 5 years if I haven't read it. So I really need to get to some of these that have just been on here for way too long. Thank you all so much for watching and tuning in today, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye.